this mic just for fun. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We've got one project to review today. Uh, Pegasus Park Bridge Labs. This is a multi-phase life sciences catalyst development project with access to shared equipment and lab space to ultimately include 1.7 million square feet near the Southwestern Medical District. Today's review will be focused on improvements to buildings 2 and 3 and an adjacent courtyard and how this work can strategically set up future campus improvements. You will also provide initial recommendations regarding the future build-out plans related to placement of proposed buildings, connectivity within and from the campus, integration of usable open space, and opportunities to address city priorities such as iSwim and CCAP, with transition of surface parking to structured parking to create a walkable campus environment and an important catalyst project in this part of Dallas. We anticipate this development team will return to the panel at some point with more detailed plans as future phases are prepared. I'd like to turn it over now to Sam with Montgomery Street Partners to introduce the project before his design team walks you through the project.
So that's some of the work being done. We really have seen, just based on our track record over the last year and a half of this campus welcoming tenants, that we do have the demand here, and it's already proven to attract companies and talent from across the country. But what's important to note is that Bridge Labs really is the critical next phase of this development, because of course these companies are going to come into biolabs, and we hope that they are so successful that they grow, need more talent, need more space. And of course, they need the larger space to be able to stay in the region. We want them to stay and be able to have roots in North Texas and at Pegasus Park as they grow. So really, Bridge Labs is the critical next phase to be able to do that. So with that, I will kick it back over to Sam.
I think we just go to the next slide.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Diego Rosso. I'm with Perkins & Will. I'm from the design team. I have OJD and Tom Hall with us too, the architect and civil engineering. So we're going to talk about building 2 and 3, which is, like they say, the next phase for this massive project. Building 2 and 3, they call it 2 and 3 because they were treated two different buildings back in the day. But if you look at it from eye level like this one, this is one large structure. It was for office, right? So some of the existing MEP systems that were ready for a research facility. So that's one of the things that we're gonna do as a project is take all of that out and keep all the infrastructure needed for the tenant that wanted to do life science research to have a place here where they can call home. So building 2 is about a 75,000 square foot, 2-story building with a penthouse that we are going to reuse that structure. It's in good shape. We feel like there's a lot of value into that. So we're gonna reuse this building. However, building 3, which is a smaller building, for about maybe 25,000 square foot building, 1 story, is not in good shape. It has some significant structural issues with the building. So in order to make this a facility that is gonna for a long time, and people can use it, always we're doing the same. We're gonna keep us at 1 team building. So we're gonna do a brand new structure in the same footprint of building 3, but it's gonna be a 2-story. So at the end of the day, it's gonna be one single building with a new facade all the way around. So whenever you're driving, 2, 3 years from now, when you're driving along, you're gonna see 2 different buildings. Excuse me. There is several features of the existing building that is worth discussing, and also is worth to kind of take advantage of. One of them, as you can see, probably if you walk through the site, there is a connection to the power, which is like there is a lot of amenities on that, and we're going to take advantage of that. At the same time, there is the biolabs that we're talking about also in the south portion of it. So this becomes kind of the bridge between the two existing buildings. So this building is going to be that building bring everything together. So it's going to be one of those buildings that wanna not only have good stuff in the inside, but also take advantage of what is existing around it. The process already started. Some of the exterior landscape that was done in the last year or so. It's really good. It worked very well. We're gonna take advantage of that. Not only that, everything is complete. Our building wants to be part of the overall campus. The main entrance to the north, again connecting to the courtyard between the building, the inside and outside space. Here, we're taking advantage of the south side of the service. There was already previous service. There is an existing loading dock that we're going to reuse. So again, we're trying to take advantage of all this stuff that we have in the side today. The island bed is down the perimeter that the area we're working on this particular project. A few things more about the building. Sustainable. Sustainable design says that we're going to sustainable building. We're going to follow the rebuilding requirements. Things like low flow fixtures, no VOC, but all these sustainable sites are going to be part of our design. One of the things we'll get, we save water, save energy, all of that, with the new systems are going to get improved. The other thing for all the exterior of the building, we're going to match the material that is already in the campus. We have brick, we have cotton wall, we have the panel. So we're already creating kind of a language that we want to continue, building that. With that, I want to just throw it over to Cameron about the landscape.
Yeah, my name is Cameron Reynolds. I'm a landscape architect with OKB. And so with the landscape approach, our intervention has mainly been focused in this courtyard area that we're talking about. So the north side is, the top of this page is this existing tower and the building 2 keys on the south. And that courtyard that's existing, like you just said, has been recently renovated. It's in still pretty good condition with as far as the existing trees that are there. There's some smart oaks and some bald cypress that are in great condition with beautiful large trees. Want to make sure we're preserving those. So the intervention in this area is going to be very light touch. Want to reinforce the space that's there and provide a little bit more shade with kind of a grove of trees in between the two and activate that art space, that collaboration space between the tower and the existing building 2-3. How those labs come together. Also create kind of a welcoming entry, and then just again reinforce all the labs, how they kind of spiral around this park that we're trying to activate, and then those will kind of lead into the and flow into the proposed master plan that we're showing here. And you can see
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Colston, the Purposeful Leader in Urban Design Practice in the region. So you can kind of see the red dashed line on here basically is the extent of the work and kind of building off of the existing green space. But I'm sure all of your question is like, how does this fit into a grander vision and what's your intention for building all the amazing ecosystem over the fabric of this 25-acre site over time? So we'll take it like we would eating an elephant, one step at a time. It starts off with the process of retrofitting the tower, then retrofitting the building for biolabs, the Bridge Labs project's next, and then we've been working with our Pegasus Park LLC team on really trying to frame out how we go from here. So we started off really by trying to build off of the anchors that are there. Obviously, the tower is a significant visual on the landscape, and so we wanted to recognize the Pegasus, which is certainly kind of a strong visual in Dallas, recognizable. But how do you take a former ExxonMobil Zales campus and turn it into the destination life sciences market? So we're trying to move from an environment that is very much, surrounded by a larger industrial complex, if you will. Talking with Jan Moner, who is actually one of the tenants. Texas Trees Foundation is one of the tenants in the non-for-profits in Pegasus Tower. They've actually started doing some monitoring sites out here in the parking lots, looking at the impacts of heat island effect, which is a big, we recognize it was a big issue in this part of town. So we wanted to really kind of begin with a clear understanding foundationally of just understanding the land, understanding the water and some of the history and context. So I thought I might just start here with some of our urban design framework principles. And so we started out thinking about how do we create a place that's very public realm focused? How do we create a heart of the site that is also connected and not becoming just an island in itself, but hopefully that this project becomes catalytic for other things that might be transformational on this side of the freeway, this very part where the medical center is today. We also wanted to make sure that we were connecting to the existing Pegasus Park, which is immediately to the north where there's a waterway that runs across here. Not really trails accessible. I'm sure there's been lots of conversations further with the city about improving around that park, making it more accessible, making it more connected, and part of a connection piece that we think has opportunity to even connect all the way around to the Trinity River, centered around the core campus quad in the middle, but then with some spines along Lackawanna and throughout the site, then to connect back over to the park and the green space as well. The quad itself is what we really believe to be the kind of heart of Pegasus Park. And so what we want to do is build on the area that Diego and Cameron were just talking about currently between the Pegasus Park Tower and the buildings 2, 3, the Bridge Labs, and really expand that into a much broader area of public realm that is fundamentally significantly amenitized. So we're thinking very, very much about activating the ground level floors of these buildings and making this as porous as we can at the ground level. And then, fundamentally, we recognize that, people are going to be experiencing this from a lot of different perspectives. There's a freeway there, right? And so we almost are creating a visual billboard. I almost hate to say that term, but even thinking about how the architecture actually begins to create and reinforce the identity that we already see along here with the Pegasus Park Tower, but with a couple of larger towers, not nearly as tall as the existing tower, but maybe in the kind of 6 to 8 level range, that would be a residential tower. So we're definitely thinking about this as mixed use, as well as another purpose-built science and technology building. And we're thinking about all the buildings are all designed on a wet lab technology chassis. So we have the flexibility to accommodate technology users, but very specifically targeted with that chassis to accommodate wet lab science and technology tenants in the building. Now, I just want to say something about the residential. I lead a lot of our work in innovation communities across the country, the research parks, innovation districts, working with universities in that arena. One of the biggest things that we're doing is going into a lot of 20th century design tech parks, research parks that were very single use in their purpose built. And so we're going back and integrating it with all the kinds of things that we are building into the concepts of Pegasus Park. How do you create an 18-hour community? How do you build up of this? Really, thinking about residential in close proximity, thinking about the amenities that come in here. I love the fact, I think one of these drinks down here shows we've already got, nobody even said anything about it. That's part of the site, which is the beer, right? So you noticed. You noticed? All right. Yeah, so Community Brewing has come in here. So we already have a reason, but who wants to go hang out with, all this amazing technology stuff. It's like you can go get, so we have an opportunity to bring people that might not otherwise be coming to the site for the social aspects that are there. So we're creating an opportunity to really expand upon the story there. And last but not least, while some people will be passing by and they're seeing the occupancy vehicles, cars, we're really intentional in working with our colleagues at Penny Corn and talking with GARD, thinking about mobility very intently. Now, unfortunately, we're a little bit over a mile from both commuter rail and light rail, but there are existing shuttles that are already operating between UT Southwestern Medical Center and Pegasus Park. We see their opportunity to expand upon those, and we look very intentionally more broadly at what a shuttle loop that could be rotating between the Southwestern Medical Center proper and the site. And then we're also thinking about those kind of last mile intentional uses, bicycle, scooters, and alternative connectivity with this. So I really wanted to start off with the principles of the project, because I think this whole notion of having something that definitely is that first in class life science community, but it's really continue to build a life cycle that is very people focused, has that kind of 18-hour community, mobility enriched, very pedestrian focused, connecting to the natural environment. And one thing I think probably has been common, Dave probably speak to this more, but as we begin to think about looking at the PID, we've really been trying to think about parking in a little bit different way, because we have been trying to think about how we could mitigate some of the strategies for all the parking demand and all the single occupancy vehicle traffic by looking at some TDM strategies, integrating housing so that people could live and work in close proximity, thinking about the shuttle systems and other things, so we wouldn't have to build out an entire site completely laden with garages. Now that said, We do have 3 new parking garages that are coming on because we are trying to be also responsive to our Texas-centric driving culture that we have here and be responsive to the tenants that will be coming along. So we have, here's the tower, here's the Bridge Labs building that we're talking about, and here's the existing biolabs that just opened up, which if you haven't get a chance to tour that, it's super, super amazing. Phasing is still kind of a little bit in play in terms of what happens next, but multi-tenant, science building, science building, science building, and science building. So 4 new of the science and technology buildings, parking structures that will serve the amenities around the site, as well as the buildings in these locations and the existing resources that are already here. Here's the brewery right here. And then this is the intended residential tower, which actually is built in together with parking. If you look at this plan and kind of look at the one right above, you can see a lot of the fundamental kind of transformative impact that I think is going to be happening over the site. We also know there's some cultural facilities and tensions over here. There's other projects in play. I believe Lydia Hill actually owns some property that's over in this location, or that David, I think they've owned some property over in this location. So we're really interested about how we can connect more broadly to the water and the waterfront over time. But the notion is to really build and expand upon the existing quad that's here today, so that we end up with a conversion of a site that is fundamentally kind of built out with that industrial kind of feel to a space that becomes much more green, much more connected, and a really fundamentally folks that celebrated and welcome. I could talk a lot more about detailed access, circulation, how we thought very intentionally about the ground floor uses of the building and the exterior uses, and really blending the indoor outdoor spaces, how those work. We thought about them both in plan and in section, and how we move through the different buildings. But I think I'll probably stop there because I suspect you guys might have some questions.
Okay, thank you all for the presentation. Very clear, very logical. Before I open up the session here, my peers, I want to, by way of introduction, my name is Eurico Francisco, I chair the Community Review Design Peer Review Panel. Along with me, you have amazing talent. We have engineers, we have landscape architects, we have planners, we have architects, of course, we have historic preservation specialists. We are all volunteers. We do this because we all know just like this. So what you hear from us is we have no agenda other than promote a better city for ourselves, for future generations. That's what we do. What I'd like to do now is to do this in 2 parts. First, you will have a chance, and we'll have a chance to ask questions about the presentation, regarding the presentation. Second, we offer comments, we offer feedback. And then we'll have a chance, along with questions and the feedback, we'll have a chance to converse. Sounds good? All right, so with that, how about questions? We have to start. Yes, James, how about you? Do you have questions for the presenter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have some questions. My first question is more of a high-level question. You mentioned the brain drain. What are the top attractors? What's drawing people? You could list like 3 or 4. What's pulling that talent out of Dallas? So I'm just wondering, what needs to be incorporated here that they see in other places? I mean, I know Dallas well, but what do you see that as being specific to this?
Yeah.
Do I answer this? Yeah, so I would say it's a couple things. One is certainly just, I think I mentioned it, it is the lack of purposeful product that caters to these companies.
Yeah.
A lot of these companies, if you think about a company like Recode Therapeutics, who raised $120 million in the most recent funding round, they not only, there can be a 5,000-foot lab space in a small building within the city of Dallas. But what those companies need to say to their investors is, I need to find a large enough campus, a large enough building that if I grow to the, to the level that I think I'm going to grow, I can scale throughout the campus over time. So, and also these people all need hyper specialized facilities. I mean, this is going to have incredibly robust HVAC infrastructure, pre-built lab suites, upgraded gas, water, power. There is truly no product that exists like this in the market. So, and what these companies need to do is once they hit their funding round, they need to get into the lab as fast as possible. They're going through an FDA approval process. They have critical research deadlines. All they need to do is get into a functional lab as quickly as possible. But beyond that, they need to say, where can I grow and scale within an ecosystem? And one of the limiting factors in Dallas right now is there just is no space for these companies to grow. So anytime that any of these companies, for example, coming out of biolabs, as they grow, they hit another funding round, they want to hire a bunch of people. Today, there really just is nowhere for them to go. So the easiest place for them is to say, I'm going to go to the coastal regions where there's 20 million square feet of lab space in Boston, San Francisco, San Diego, North Carolina. So I think on one hand, it is just the real estate side of the equation. I think on the other, it's definitely workforce development. I think a lot of these companies as well, in prior years, I do not think there's been a robust effort level, despite the fact that we have all the talent here, in terms of having an engine of workforce development of, people that are focused on the science and tech space. But again, I think as Lily was saying, a lot of that work has been going on over the last couple of years and is continuing to accelerate. And I think that the opportunity for Dallas as well is just the amount of net migration that's happening here. It's just, very friendly business environment, low tax state. There's a lot of reasons as to why I think companies are willing to relocate here. Much more business friendly than a lot of states where lab exists today. And I think that coupled with workforce development that folks like, Wyatt Hill and others are doing, I think that's going to be the critical juncture. So
I'll also just add that if you look at a lot of the other thriving ecosystems across the country, the success of a lot of the startups becoming high growth and essentially established companies over time is highly correlated with geographic proximity to other ecosystem partners across these areas, like workforce development, access to investment capital, and things like that. And so that's why we not only want the companies on campus, but why we've also very intentionally brought in partners like UT Southwestern's Tech Transfer Office and SMU, and several other universities, as well as its accelerator programs and investors. And again, just the geographic proximity and being able to walk the same halls and converge on a daily basis is highly correlated with the success of these companies if you look at the other ecosystems across the country.
The most successful, they're all large campuses with millions of square feet, massive academic collaborations. Like all of the components that we're trying to build here are largely built on the successes that you've seen in the Bay Area, San Diego, and others, and in Boston for that.
This is something, give us a screen example of what you're talking about in San Francisco. For preference.
Yeah, I mean, I think about some of the campuses that are built in Kendall Square, for example, in Boston, which is MIT adjacent, massive multi-acre ecosystem. MIT has built their own research buildings there. You've got the likes of biopharma that have come and built, their own large kind of 500,000 facilities. You've got small scale incubators. You've just got this massive collision of the intersection of academia, private capital, and incubators. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to build here. So I'd say, Kendall Square in Boston is probably the best example.
So I guess the link to UT Southwestern is really important in that regard. We don't have an MIT.
And a lot of the companies, for example, that are going to biolabs, and Lily can speak this better. We actually do have companies that are relocating from out of Texas. It's not just there's a lot of organic growth, but there also are companies that are coming here and saying, UT Southwestern, they've got almost 6,000 research projects. They are by far the preeminent research institution, I would argue, in all of Texas, not even North Texas. I think 6 Nobel laureates, huge focus on gene therapy, oncology, brain science, massive ties to CPRIT. So there are companies that are actually in biolabs that are coming from, I believe, California and others that do want to be here and be tied to that research institution.
It's very interesting because when we first started thinking about this work, we were really like, gosh, okay, we see so much talent and so many great ideas coming out of our local institutions. At UT Southwestern alone, over the last few years, there have been over 80 companies to spin out. But again, prior to Pegasus Park, there was zero commercial lab space for them to go to. So that, again, to the space point, is one of the reasons why they were going to the coast. And so we really started this project to say, how can we keep a lot of this talent here? How we can keep the companies here, the IP here? And it's been successful at keeping that here.
Yeah.
And it's been, 50% of the companies are coming from all over the country.
Yeah.
Including some of these major hubs.
Yeah.
UT Southwestern, it's number 1 in the world for publishing high quality biomedical research, number 5 in the world for advancing innovation. It was just published that they have the best tech transfer office in the state, 4th in the country. So they're really good at commercializing, their technology out of the university, and just having this campus provides them space to do so here in the region.
I have one more quick one, and this one's maybe more for Cameron. I was wondering if you, with the park at all, if you had thought about, I thought you were going to say, competing with, they have the natural environment, both coasts, obviously, access to oceans and beaches and things like that, mountains. But here we actually have the old river. The lake is if I'm not mistaken, that's the old Trinity River meander that's right there through your campus. I am a landscape architect and I love history. So, some way that you might express that would make this a little more interesting. Maybe you've done that. I don't think I heard it, but a connection to that. And
So you can see here,
I was wondering if you'd given some thought to that.
there is this Lakahana Street that we're trying to
Mhm.
connect with is kind of the new urban street that we're going to connect into Pegasus Park and Commonwealth that kind of leads you to everything. This has a terminus of a kind of an overlook terrace that
Mhm.
sits onto that park area. So it activates that park, brings
Yeah.
more people to it. The future plan is also to kind of integrate into the trails that tie into the future Dallas
The other-
bike trails as
Mhm.
well. And
Yeah.
how we all link is still it's being investigated and understood a bit more. There's a couple other little work pod areas, outdoor workspaces that we're trying to bring it into that river or this little lake, I guess,
Yeah.
if you want to call it. But
It's almost a false river.
yeah, we're trying to activate it,
Mhm.
expand that campus, try to blur the lines between this city-owned space and the campus. And it is Pegasus Park. That's the name of the campus. That's the name of the park as well.
Mhm.
They're kind of tied together. We're trying to make that like a seamless experience.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Don?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the varieties of things that we bring to this discussion today, the chairman didn't get to one before, is often we also bring at least one dullard who doesn't understand anything, and I get to fill that role today. This may be more for staff. I truly don't know what we want to talk about today. We have gone, let's just take that discussion we just had, and then let's go back to the other side where it says, we're really talking about those green buildings with the red dotted lines today. I don't see anything on those buildings and all. So my basic question is, what do you want us to help you with today? Can I get some of that?
Yeah.
Good.
So the development team has been working with our Office of Economic Development. We currently don't have a TIF district here. We perhaps could get one in the future. I think and they are seeking some assistance from the city on the initial phase, buildings 2 and 3. And so in a way, what we're asking is, we know there's not a lot to talk about and maybe to comment on buildings 2 and 3, but if you think about it in a larger picture as they develop out future phases, how can those small interventions on buildings 2 and 3 and the small improvements to the courtyard space kind of set up work in the future? But really what we're also asking for is some very general or big picture comments or recommendations for the build out of the phase. So looking at the future phases, so what you see on that illustrative board or that one at the far end, really thinking about that because they will be back, but we want to set them up for success when they do come back. So I know there's not a lot to look at in phase 2 and 3, and it's not necessarily something that we look at in terms of how does it affect the public realm. But if you think about connectivity through the site, the use of their service area and how that might impact or not impact future development. I know we're kind of reaching and asking a lot from the panel here today, but I think that's what we've been told and recommended to kind of look at this way. It's a little different than usual.
Okay, and so expanding on that, but one of the things you did say is that buildings 2 and 3 are part of this, and my understanding is one of them gets completely removed and replaced. Plus there's minor interventions, or are they major exterior renovations, and how does that roll out? Because normally when we get things like that, we talk about how they relate to the pedestrian experience when you have these kinds of things. And are we supposed to talk about that today? Because I don't really see anything. I don't know what's designed and what's projected. It sounds like those buildings are designed or are not designed.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reason why we're taking down building 3 is just because it's structurally cannot
Right.
withstand it. We need to reinforce it. So we're completely refacing. There's also issues with people about handling that's not great now. So we're completely refacing building 2, 3 with a new brick facade.
Okay, so I'm one of the architects, so I get to wade in there then, sounds like. Okay, that's good. That'll do me for my
and
questions
just
right
kind
now.
of Close renderings of like the curtain wall that we're gonna replace right at the central lobby and the brick, and how that looks.
And we don't expect those back. Once we do this, they'll just be part of the general design, and when we see future phases, that'll be behind us. Okay, thank you very much.
Right, Mark.
Yeah, just a couple questions. One, Irving Boulevard. I know the city has had plans for Irving Boulevard as it's closer towards downtown, with the overlay that's there. Is there anything with Irving Boulevard that would affect this?
Currently, I'm not aware of anything. That also includes the extension of Trinity Strand, perhaps in the future. So yeah, nothing that I think would affect this at all.
Okay. The next question I have is probably geared more towards Tommy. From a zoning standpoint, what is the current zoning on the property, and how are you guys going forward with the city?
It's in a PD today, and the PD allows lab space. So from a use standpoint, we're in good shape. We're doing a little minor amendment of approved development plan right now associated with this. I think our big challenge from a zoning standpoint, longer term, is going to be parking. And are we going to have to open up the PD to change that? Our hope is, in our plan, we've talked to the high level of city staff about this, at least the uses that we're planning for the long-term vision already exist on the site. So we're going to have Kimley Horn do a detailed parking usage study of what's there today and try to extrapolate from that an actual utilization rate. And maybe we can do it all with a shared parking agreement with ourselves and not have to open the PD. That would be ideal. For whatever reason, the PD today, and maybe it's just because it was easy, there's a really reduced parking ratio on legacy buildings. It's like 1 per 500. But if you build new lab space, it's 1 per 300. And it would have been cool to save this for that alone, right? It just doesn't work. And so all of a sudden we build the exact same thing and it has to have almost twice as much parking. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
You know, but everyone, there's so much momentum around solving that problem. I'm not worried about it. We'll figure it out. Our goal is to not have to PD only for parking.
Okay.
Everything else.
Thank you. Last question, more geared towards engineering. I don't know if Kimley Horn's here today. Oh, awesome. How does the site drain right now? And, how is that looked at in the future as far as the build out of this campus and probably creating more impervious surfaces?
So Judd Molnix is going to go on. Wasn't part of the earlier presentation, but the site drains to 2 different basins, ultimately going to the Trinity River.
Okay.
So first basin is Pegasus Park. So this is a floodplain area here that's been studied as a Zone 80 floodplain, and we're taking that into account with our flows. So about 1/3 to 1/2 of the site drains north to that basin. The other half drains to a very large storm system that's in Irving Boulevard. So this entire parking that you see you can see it in this picture here, all of that parking surface drains to some inlets on the south side here and then ties into some inlets in Irving and gets underground in Irving.
Okay.
So it's split kind of 1/3, 2/3, and we're going to essentially match that. Ultimately, those 2 basins go to one very soon after.
And then to the Trinity River, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
One thing I might add to that, we work really closely with Ted and his team, and I don't know if you can quite tell it on the section, it's kind of a nominal component, but I mean, this is all within the protected levee area.
Mhm.
But we spent a lot of time thinking about, obviously, about sustainability, but also about resilience and what the implications are. We all learned during Katrina that sometimes levees fail, right? So we made a really intentional effort to make sure that, you know, level one of each of our buildings are set, I believe, 4 feet above the 100-year flood, or the 500-year, I think was it. But we wanted to make sure that if we ended up having a situation that became, you know, an extreme circumstance, that the side occupiable floors were set at a point that we could accommodate that.
And if you go to the site today and look at the buildings that are there, you'll see some switchback ramps that tie into the overall infrastructure of the site that are coming up to finished floors that are sitting 2 and 3 feet above the adjacent ground. It's because of that. So there's already been, you know, contemplation of that with what's there today. It's in good condition. It's where it needs to be. And then in the future, we'll continue that and it'll make it seamless because it's not something new that we're doing. It's something that's already there.
Right, we work really closely between architecture and engineering and landscape architecture to make sure that it doesn't feel like, okay, well, there's the landscape zone that's down here, and then up here is the building plan, which is part of some of the legacy today.
Mhm.
Main occupiable floor on Pegasus Tower, for example, is, you know, the first floor is.
Yeah, there's quite some steps to walk up to get up there. So thank you very much.
Just to add to that, I mean, we are, in the master plan, we are reducing the amount of impervious. Right now, it's just, if you drive by, you can see it, some of those photos, it's just like a huge surface lot. We're trying to reduce that and provide more landscaping and green space.
So just so I understand, one of you said that the site is, even maybe it was, you said that the first floor is 4 feet above, 100-year, 500-year flood level. Tommy, you said that there are ramps currently around the site that bring you up to the site level.
Yes, so the city of Dallas's code requires you to look at both the 100 and the 500 year.
Yes.
And be a certain distance above that for your first occupiable floor, and also to make sure entrances and garages are above that as well. So we looked at that existing campus, took that into account, and made sure that we do that. And at the same time, there is, if you go out there and see it, there are some ramps that come up, and it's not just 10 feet, here's a ramp up into the building. It's integrated into the overall campus about how you're walking, your switchbacks look really nice.
So to that question, on the section that you have drawn where it shows the lobby in relationship to Urban Boulevard, which seems like it's very flat and very accessible, would that not be the case in a long-term built condition if the occupiable floor is 4 feet above existing?
So urban
Grade?
is out of the floodplain area. So the floodplain is kind of,
See, the floodplain that we are mentioning is the one that's after with the levees in place, not without the levees.
right, yes. no.
Okay.
That floodplain is only where the pond is.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
For a second, it's under 9%. Even if the levees fail, we are still growing the flood. That's not the case. In the existing condition, with the levees in place, the floodplain level is concerned.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify that.
A couple of questions. So what is the security requirement for the campus? Will it be gated? Will small people coming from outside have the ability to walk around the campus?
Yeah, I can answer that. So, I mean, currently there is a gate that wraps the entire perimeter of the campus, but in the master plan, that comes down and it really is seamless with what the city portion of Pegasus Park is. And there will be security like badge readers, like you see most office hours to get into any of the individual buildings, but that green space will be a seamless transition for the public. Tied in.
Okay. And that ties into my question about the vision for the future and sort of getting back to the questions about long-term strategy. So is this a campus that ultimately you see as being part of the public realm that is usable by, that's sort of a destination, or is it mainly serving the community and the workforce that,
Yeah, I mean, I see it as kind of both, especially with everything going on here. There's community, hopefully some renovations at Pegasus Park. There's the Salmon Center. Like this whole area is in need for a lot of redevelopment. So I see it in 5-10 years being something that can be used. There could be retail incorporated into it. We thought about that in some of our buildings. So I see it as a bigger mixed use development. Not solely just for the tenants using it, but everyone here.
And given the mission criticality of these types of users, they get a very high utilization rate, so there's gonna be a lot of people on campus at all times. So it's critical to augment this with service retail amenities, all of which would be very much publicly accessible and designed in that way. And community brewing, I think, is the first step of that, but I think we'd like to augment it with much more of that type of use.
Okay, and then my last question, you made overtures to the public transportation system and how there's a shuttle system in place, but it being right off the railroad, have you had discussions already with DART about a potential future stop at the location? It seems like it's designed well on that north side to be able to accommodate.
Yeah, Chuck, feel free to jump in, but we did talk to DART about it. We had a meeting. I mean, right now there's a stop. I believe it's like right here. We talked to them about like, is there a better relocation of it? And they were open to that, but obviously there's no light rail in proximity. So I think in terms of transit, the best we can do is like try to incorporate that stop as part of the campus and it being a Pegasus Park stop.
Yeah, and in this thing in your packet here, there's a public transit shuttle icon, and it shows where those bus stops exist today.
Okay.
So we've been discussing that, like Grant said, with DART. We've also been in discussion with UT Southwest and others about how can we integrate the two. The UT Southwest shuttle system is actually more robust for this area than DART is. So that's maybe a more critical partner right now than DART would be. It's better proximity, the connectivity of the type of people that are working with UT Southwest and Oregon campus. So we've really focused on that to make sure that we're bringing those together. Certainly not ignoring DART by any means. We've talked with them, but we want to make sure we make those partnerships.
Yeah, because as we have these discussions about trying to draw in folks from the coast, one of the reasons they're also having success there is because they have these great infrastructural transportation systems that we're trying to retrofit into, working. So just making sure that that's a consideration too.
One high level thing to just consider is, a lot of these places we work, for every PhD in applied lab code that's doing basic science, there's 4 or 5 technicians that, maybe first generation going for their education. They can go to the Dallas College, and they can, get a 2-year program and become a tech and make $50,000 to $60,000 a year. And so, but thinking about opportunities to create inclusive access for somebody who doesn't have a car,
Exactly.
be able to connect, folks who maybe aren't at a higher level of income that have that affordability, be able to give lots of options for people like me, just like rather not have to go in a car. That all of that flexibility incrementally over time is going to.
My questions, I guess, were along norms. What's the funding mechanism? Yes, we're yet to be determined on what we're asking that for. Glad to hear about housing. What about transient? A lot of research facilities I hear about, a lot of people that are coming in. So that's my question is, what about hotel or short-term, housing? If that's could be included.
Well, yeah, I don't think we mentioned it, but there is a hotel actually located right here, and there is a trail that or sidewalk that kind of wraps around.
But it's not on site.
No, it's not on site, but it's adjacent.
The first part of your question too, is the funding mechanism is TBD. The funding source is not. Funding source is going to be federal tax generated by this project. It's not just the buildings, the business and personal property tax, the equipment associated with the facility. So the tax impact of this is significant, as well as the job creation. That makes
make sense for a tip, but we can't get a tip in place in time to try to start this next year, so it may be some sort of creative for this phase, and then tip the broader campus long term.
So to that funding, is that one of the reasons you guys are here is because there is an idea of creating a TIF?
So we've made that.
Or is there money actually being negotiated by the EDC right now that helps
It's being negotiated.
subsidize part of building to improve?
We've made a full application of building too.
Okay, thank you.
And so we're gonna take that info, but we also, our management consultant, obviously they're analyzing this, but they're analyzing the full impact law. Probably.
We appreciate just understanding clarity so we understand the subject.
Yeah, what's being asked of the city and.
Yeah.
Support and the things that we provide.
Yes. We have made an economic, we enjoy spending time.
But is it okay to just kind of have some questions, some comments? I'll ask that we stick with questions and then we can offer comments because otherwise. Get questions for clarification.
Yeah. So I see that the government is focused on the week, and we're looking at the big picture campus, there's some renderings, there's some standards. Just on that one, which is a line diagram, if you remember, that's on it, and that little dotted line that looks like a turnout for a spot.
This one right here?
This one is also on the left side. Left of the building.
Oh, there's existing power line.
Existing power.
That is kind of confusing, but yeah.
Okay, that's what I was going to do, these sketches that I see that down there. So that looks like based on their scale, that there's like a concept to a drop off that comes back. Or is a U-turn right there by the end of the existing building. Picture. See right there? It looks like it's turning that around right there. This is that existing building, right?
That access and circulation plan might work better for you to look at over there. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I was gonna suggest just to clarify, yeah, so this is a distinct building. That's right. Right. And see that far right that you're showing right there? It is not on this, and I tell you why it's all of that. That's why I said it. It is very good, this is all green spaces on the heart, but you have to make sure you consider how to get that. Because currently, what's the parking lot?
This is utility drawing, that's actually the transportation drop off, here's the streets in here.
Yeah.
With the pedestrian prioritized streets and then the service. And then we've got kind of the service.
I understand that. I'm saying is that you can check the whole latest concept, because I feel like this corner is not number page 4. As we do this, we have to do that. That's why.
And we've analyzed fire lane and fire lane access for here. This drive right here through that campus is going to be fire lane access, but not vehicular access. It's going to be some sort of paver, something like that that's approved by the fire department. But that allows it to be a pedestrian friendly area. So that way we can achieve the fire access you're talking about without it looking like a concrete fire lane. Because that's counterproductive to what we're trying to do with the parking facilities.
Yeah, so that actually, that kind of pages.
See, like, I'm looking at that one, like, between building A and existing building 2 and 3. What I'm saying is later on, as we develop the plan, let's take a look at it to find out how we get fire protection to that point.
Yeah, and the goal will be that this that looks just like a sidewalk and pedestrian sidewalk is designed for that fire protection. So that in the event of an emergency, which with these type of facilities and all the systems in it, that's an important thing for us to consider. It'll function.
In these buildings, we're talking about, what, is there any, front gates considered? And then I tell you why the problem in my mind is each building and here, so they have a lot of the infrastructure which is HVAC in the basement, and it stays and cause catastrophic losses. And after that, and then back, and it's on a lot of money. So that is why, as you're recommending this building, it's came up. Just saying again, the thought about maybe it is not placed on the first floor level, maybe it's somewhere else, and what are the backups? What is it, spend a lot of money for emergency population, all of it underground. So I was wondering if there's any thoughts on that.
Yeah,
on the HVAC.
Yeah, I mean, so for the HVAC on 2, 3, it's all located in that house. And there's cooling towers at the top of the building.
Yeah, you can see the screening around the top of the major lab buildings. So some even that are even allowed.
We're not going down any.
We went round and round on water tables and we're just moving everything up. So, and moving the major building systems up to the.
And as you mentioned, I mean, they are critical facilities where there are a lot of backup generators.
Is this site already private? Is it already a private site?
Yes.
It's already private site?
For this.
And we have a preliminary plat that's been approved for an addition of, I think the property is just over here.
Yeah.
That we own to the overall acre piece. So that preliminary plat has been approved through the and is part of this building. Comes over that property line. Yeah.
The other side of the lateral.
Yeah.
Flooding mess involved. But here's where those backup generator systems are serving to.
No, I'm just saying out things, asking the questions. That way, they can work based on what I've seen before. Also, you mentioned that traffic, I'm a traffic engineer, that's my experience. So in general, I see a lot of parking garages. Kimberly Homes done a TIA on it already. Investigated the access points and egress points and how many access we need to each garage. And this is why I'm saying, this is maybe just me, and I'm not an architect, but I was hoping they're putting so much time and effort in this campus, but I don't see a one stop, which is like, oh, wow, I'm here. It looks a lot to me as an extension of the existing campus on the other side. Like, where is the one spot where, if I'm looking at the area limit, it's part of the street, where is that one spot where I can say, yes, I've arrived, where if I want to go catch and move around in this case.
So the intention for that is the main access point is going to be here at the inflection of Iron Ridge and Lackawanna. So that's one major point of access based on how we're getting there from Commonwealth and the highway. And then the other is going to be, there's a major access point here off of Irving. So there's a couple of different front doors, but also we're trying to bring people to these garages and then disseminate through the campus and have the campus kind of have that very pedestrian feel. So we don't want to have a arrival point in the center where we get lots of traffic and that kind of segregates the rest of the campus from a pedestrian walkability perspective. So it also just functionality. When we have these entrances for these parking garages on the edges, it's a lot more efficient getting people in and out and getting.
Hopefully, if you're plugging it into Uber in the future, your Uber is going to take you to an address of any one of these buildings. So, intentionally, there's an access point on Pegasus Drive, a Pegasus Drive South access point from Irving, vehicular access point from Irving down here, a vehicular access point from Irving down here, a vehicular access from Iron Ridge here. So the whole idea of this becoming a part of not just a big giant campus that only has one point of entry is really about creating greater levels of connectivity. But I think if you're asking like, where is the there, that's really kind of intentionally focused as that sort of expanded, really sort of, campus core that you'll experience in a lot of different ways.
Just a point of clarity on the access, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are cars allowed to drive between building B and C?
Between here.
Between that area, so that is,
Yeah.
You're saying no, you're saying yes.
Cars could come here and then cars could come here, but currently we're not planning on allowing just an employee or someone like that
It's a more emergency.
to drive all
service.
the way through the center of this.
Okay, so then cars access the garages off the public roads and not from inside the campus.
One of the main access points for this is going to be off this private road, just here, but we'll also have some access points off of Lackawanna here and, potentially an access point off of Irving here.
Is it the same with the other parking garage 3?
Yes, parking garage 3 will have an access here, here, and then also potentially back here.
All right. Well, and the plan is to extend Pegasus Park Drive.
Yes, all the way down.
Yeah.
But it's not currently, this portion is city right of way. This is not, it's not really even planned to be city, and we're not planning on making this a public drive, but it will be a private drive that connects Irving to Pegasus Park.
Okay.
If you're driving a car, you won't know the difference, whether it's right of way or not.
That's good. Thanks for clarifying. I do have one last question for you guys. We see, sure, buildings 2 and 3, existing biolabs. We also see future footprints, buildings A, B, C, and D, and parking garages footprint in addition to building E. Can you tell us how did you get to that number of square footage, to that square footage? Is it what is allowable, or what is allowed? Is it did you maximize? What drove? Is it market demand?
Yeah, I mean,
is it forecasting 20 years from now? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so I mean, we didn't even get to the limits of like what we could do. We tried to maximize density so that this could have an urban campus feel. There is limitations of how high you want to go on a lab building before it just gets more challenging.
Right.
Chemical management, the higher you go up. So it's trying to maximize what's an efficient building size and height.
Yeah.
And keeping this campus to have that feel where there's a lot going on. There's people walking from building to building, and it's like a dense, like a university campus feel.
And I'm just note that like the preferred configuration for a life science building is something that looks and feels like this, which is a wider floor plate, larger building, typically over 30 to 40,000 feet, and that's all these buildings are designed for high ceilings, 15 to 16 foot clear, with large floor plates that allow for more efficient build out of all types of S&T space. So in doing that, matching it with the parking, as Grant said, that's we're not even close to the the limits of what we could build, but these are built to be efficient lab buildings in the same vein that you would see in the coastal markets for sure.
We understand the typical floor plate for this kind of things we get.
Yeah.
The question was regarding total square footage anticipated for the site. And what you're saying again is that you didn't maximize what the site allowed. You did not.
So that is correct. And we have, so the Pegasus Tower is an office building, right?
Yes.
So it's not a wet lab building, and it is 17 stories tall. And I'll let my science and technology lab architect partner kind of speak to this a little bit more. We have one building that exceeds, that is intended as a science building, building D, that exceeds 5 floors. And it was kind of intentionally that the rest of them that sort of said at that point, oh, Diego, you can speak the why.
We typically for laboratories, like I was saying, we have limited of how many quantity of chemicals in the upper floors.
Yeah.
So 4th floor is kind of what we want to be. 1 and 2 is ideal, and that's what we plan to do. 2 and 3, that's what we want to be. 3 and 4 is doable, but it's a little harder. 3 and 4, they have a limit. So in order to have that flexibility to any kind of tenant to come here, but have it.
And then also the other factor was kind of getting into high-rise building classification and what trigger the owners really wanted to invest in before having to go to those extra levels of measures and still being able to accommodate the program with the lab science configurations.
Very good. Great. Thanks. All right. I know the question part has been longer than expected, but good questions to the answers. Thank you. I think now we are free to have a conversation, to offer comments, to offer feedback, and we're going to have to go by order here, whoever. Norman,
Yeah.
Please get this.
Okay, thanks. I've got a few things here. Can I come up, Mr. Chair? Can I
Please.
do this? Easier this way. But my thinking, now that I have some concept of where we're going here, very high level, very, very low level. Very high level, this is incredible. I commend you, your dedication, the needs, the response, changing of this. Really, what should be a really cool environment with the remainders of the original Trinity River in there. all the things that are happening around it. This is needed, this is wonderful. This is a 21st century response to 21st century issues. Great. There are a few things I'd like to talk about. If I may do this. So as we go down some and start to talk about it as a campus, a few things strike me. Number one, this right here. I was looking at the maps, I was looking at how you do it here. It strikes me, you have not convinced me that Pegasus Park Drive is needed, much less an advantage here. Right now, it does come over and it turns and goes down, looks like it comes down here and actually services the back of the existing building and it connects over to some other things over here. If we could eliminate that and actually tie this urban campus directly into this park seamlessly. And if you're telling me that this is maybe the residential building, now you got the residential building connected up seamlessly to this venue right here, big plus. I think you can mitigate the lack of continuity over here on this road, and still service everything, without that. So that is an opportunity, I think, still presents itself, and I would suggest that you look, very carefully at that. Second thing that struck me right off is this. We have prominent, we also like to look at sites in relationship to what's around them. What around them needs redevelopment or we expect a change in the future. We like to take that into account here. So I'm looking at the edges and the approach and the relationship from the outside into your site. So I see the most prominent corner with a parking garage on it. So I go, well, okay, I go to another prominent corner and it's got a parking garage on it. Then I go up here to the, I knew it was gonna do that. Just hang on. Okay, good. Then I come up here to where we front the highway right next to the park and I find a parking garage. Well, on the one hand, I see when you move, this is driven clearly by moving those away from the urban core, and I get that. But the idea of approaching the site and encountering a parking structure, when who knows what may happen here, your phase two may happen over here or something, or another exciting thing. We're talking about perhaps cultural improvements over here. Parking structure, right there. You're surrounded by parking structures, with cool stuff in the middle. I think some better thought between those two might be worth getting into. I wonder if a 21st century solution isn't to start to integrate these uses. Where this thing on the corner has parking that you need more than what the building is associated with it needs. But still, it's a building, not a parking structure. I'm not saying underground necessarily as everybody's quick solution, but I personally understand the difficulty with that. But I think some different approach to how you integrate those things together and deal with the parking. This, to me, is still a 20th century response to parking. I think we haven't caught that part up yet. Then the last thing I will do is because what we're really specifically talking about today is this. Now, we do urban design recommendations here. This doesn't look like what we would normally thumb up around here. I mean, you have a look here. No trees, no amenities. I don't want to hang out there. It's a place that and my guess is you just haven't developed it far enough. I don't want to sit there. I don't want to. That's it's in the shade now. When it's not, that's a pretty deadly space. Parking right up. It's just, this is good. This is great. But I think the development of thought, and then again, it's our last time to see it, so I'm going to pick on you a little bit. The development of thought on the urban design experience to mitigate what you've got going as a site with these new important buildings, and how that relates think we've got a lot of work to do there. I won't get into the various specifics of how it could be done. That's usually the design team. But I think I would suggest a lot more consideration for that. And it'll be important because you'll be taking those ideas and probably extrapolating farther into other areas of the park and to the complex. I think that's really important there. And with that, sit down.
Would you guys like to comment on what Norman offered?
Okay.
Good.
I can start on the last thing we discussed. So these renderings, I noticed the same thing. Again, that's not actually how it's gonna look. They've to display the building a bit more to understand how it's gonna look. A lot of that plant material was removed from it. So, and in this one, there would be a large, this tree right here is existing as a large, I think it's like a 16-inch tomato. The one right here, along this right here, there are nice large bald cypress that are very tall, very large. I'm not sure what the caliber is on those. They're big for that part of it. And then in this area here, we are adding in more growth of trees to help that space feel more comfortable in this hot summer months. And then along this planting along the building, we're going to enhance that, add more trees and more green to that so that it feels more softer and more shaded as well.
Well, my comment would extend on to the building design here. I'm not picking just on the landscape, folks. There's just not a lot of what I would see as activation between the building architecturally and the space right now. That's kind of, again, that's why it comes to us. We have a little different ideas about some of these. That we think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of opportunity here to improve those relationships.
Yeah, I would just note, we are facing from a financial perspective, significant set of, I would say, hurdles and restrictions as it relates to the cost of this building. I mean, quite intentionally, we need to create functional lab spaces within the confines of the building, and that's where the overwhelming proportion of the dollars invested are going. So we'll certainly take that into account, but we have been, I would say, slightly hamstrung from just the financial limits that we can spend on the architectural articulation of this building versus traditional office products. It's just way more expensive inside out.
And just one thing on the parking I did want to comment on. I will admit, like, parking was one of the bigger challenges we went through. Stephen did attest, we went through a lot of iterations trying to figure out the right formula for that. And one of the struggles is going down, like you mentioned, it's expensive. And then going underneath the lab buildings is not ideal because we want our lab spaces, they have significant loading needs. Sure. And as well as the chemical management to stack parking underneath it. So yeah, I agree that the parking is a challenge. It still needs, more review, and this is.
How many spaces are in those garages? It's like 600.
No, they're each somewhere between 15 and 2,500 students. They're about 5 to 6 40 parking garages.
The saving being said is that these are all users who will be employees, not a lot of visitors. They're pretty much assigned that area of the garage.
Wait, and I think the difference is like on a life science campus, it's not like a 9 to 5 job. There's times where they're working all hours of the night, people are coming in on shifts, and it's not like a straightforward recipe like we have.
So,
One thing is, so this isn't all going to get built at once. We're kind of a little bit intentional, as Brent was just suggesting, of not necessarily commingling the garages with the other buildings. For really kind of two reasons. One, we might not need those garages in the future. If we really could go into the sort of advanced mobility traction that we could hope to imagine. And so those building footprints for garages could end up getting figured into a different kind of opportunity use. The second thing is we're really looking at this as a shared, as a shared parking campus, so that if we're not tucking parking under any one building except for the housing, and saying you own this parking, so we could end up having different kinds of tenant mixes within different buildings and assign them to a particular garage or certain levels of industrial floors and be able to maximize the demand management.
Very unfortunate. I'm thinking about residential, and that's largely my experience. Parking is 100 for residential. This just seems like overfar.
We don't want to park at one, to be clear, that's what the PD requires today. The best thing I can tell you is this is a long-term vision. Structured parking is awesome. We don't want to build any, we don't have to. But so we're absolutely aligned in building as little as possible, and we hope as it evolves, like I said, we won't have to build that much, but, you know, you lay out a plan today, you have to lay out a plan for these tenants.
We also very much need to get out of this large scale sea of concrete that is there today. The heat item that was brought up and permeability of the site, water cleanliness because we're next to Trinity, consolidating parking into one spot and making those kind of impacts to the overall site is better for the overall built environment that's around us. So that's one of our main goals, sustainable campus, clean water, lots of permeable pavement, permeable landscaping, things like that, and these consolidated areas outside of the help.
It seems that we.
Well, it's more about parking. So I had a couple of questions. First of all, I was wondering if the garages have to stay where they are as they are. Are they designed to be convertible in the future so that they're designed with a fourth floor height that can accommodate future retrofit into retail or something like that, so that you don't have to build and tear down and start over? Is that a consideration?
Especially 1 and 2 that look suspiciously like the other buildings.
Yeah.
Those are floor plates and designs that could easily have that future proofing associated with the fourth floor heights that would be retrofitted. Garage 2 is a little bit more unique in size and shape, not quite as efficient. So that one might be a little more difficult, but certainly that future proofing of the garages and the conversion from one thing to another is something that's
Okay, yeah, because to Norm's point, that parking garage too seems to be one of the most prominent corners, and it's a shame that it is a parking garage, and I also, my experience is not in this type of building, but is it something that could do a wraparound similar to an apartment building where you're at least wrapping the front facade with usable space or office, and then the interior that's inside the campus is the parking, so that you're shielded at least at the street level, by
one thing.
traffic users.
One thing to note about that corner is, well, on this scale of page, it does seem like a prominent corner. One of the corners that the least amount of traffic on the site today.
Yeah.
So, and potentially in the future as well. So the ones that have the most traffic are going to be off Commonwealth coming south, Irving coming from the right to left on the page. Those are the more prominent directions, but really Commonwealth and the interstate just off to the north that are going to provide more good traffic. So, and then to your point about the skinning of the garage and the facade and all that, certainly that's a design view that's been talked about.
There is something that in these type of facilities that you gotta be careful. And most of these buildings, most of the tenants, they have equipment that they are like, and the worst thing that you can do is put a parking garage that it can affect that.
Yeah,
That
we
is-
understand.
that was-
We get it.
Yeah.
You have to have a separate.
Yeah, separate.
So I was going to wait, but I had to
No, James has a meeting he has to get to. I want to make sure that we get to James.
I do have to leave.
Okay, so you have comments to offer now?
Well, I have a little list.
Okay.
I did have that comment, thinking about the parking at the first level, when I was talking, that parking garage too, it seems like that's just paying for something on the first floor. Screen parking. I love the idea of being able to convert them. I don't know how you factor in lab, the vibration and all those. It's all smart architects. Connecting to the history of the river, I think that's really important. It's
of Norm's comment about Pegasus Park Drive, you know, if that could be done away with or minimized, you know, drastically, I think that'd be great. So that what you don't see off the page is that connecting over to that green belt and eventually the Train Strand Lane, because I think making that canvas more porous so that you can access it from a variety of ways. Because I work in transportation, I'll kind of focus on that a little bit. I think looking at transportation, I love the fact that you're talking to Garth, talking to the city, your team, also the transportation department, just on how you access the site. The Trinity Express is very close. I just did a quick measurement on the other side. Now that's heavy, that's more commuter. So if you had a link or a station or something, or, that's maybe 600 feet away. You don't see it off the page.
That park.
Yeah, well, you know, working with TxDOT, you know, how do you get down Commonwealth as a pedestrian safely, Texas U-turn, all those things. Being able to get over to incredible. That would suddenly link this out to the suburbs, and even the Fort Worth and beyond. And then that corridor is big plans for that. You know, I think thinking in the future, Irving Boulevard, while today it may not be the highest traffic, I think bus transit, dark spots on how Irving can be a better link via bus into the site would be really important. I think that would help with this tension. Continue speaking to the DRC, I think that's great, you know, to make sure that you keep at a high level what's going to retain folks here. I think that kind of covers everything I had as far as comments, but I do feel strongly that give us some consideration to that Trinity Express link. Might think about that, maybe further than that. Whatever the future plan is there, I think that would be a pretty impressive, important link now for people that don't want to live here or live close by. Here's an option other than home. Great work.
Mark, you're mentioned.
Great presentation, guys. This is a really difficult design challenge. Obviously, you said you've been through 39 options, Stephen. I believe it. I totally believe it because, you know, I've seen it here. And when you look at this, I heard words like purpose-built facilities, and it's very obvious that's what you guys are doing, and that's what you guys are bringing here. An urban campus, research ecosystems, you know, and it just makes me think of all the possibilities. But I struggle a little bit, probably the same with Norm on this. Is this an urban campus or is it a suburban campus? And there's really tough, you know, between that, because when I think of an urban campus, I think of Dallas and I think of buildings that face all of our public streets. And they are of a public benefit to our city. And what I struggle in this master plan is that we have, you know, most of our major streets with large parking facilities on those, and those are not a public benefit to our cities. They are things that we did during the 80s and during the 90s. If you go to Uptown and look what's happened over the last 20 years, when's the last time a big parking garage has been built on a prominent street? And I think that's intuitively wrong within the master plan that we have right here. So I would urge the team not to rejigger the whole master plan, but find a way to mitigate the dominance of, first of all, parking garage number 2. I think by far, if you look at Irving Boulevard, and I've been on that road in the morning because I go to UT Southwestern a lot. As I get older, I find that we all have to go to those facilities more and more. There is a lot of traffic, but that corner has great identity for you all in the future. And as Irving Boulevard increases in traffic and the highways get more congested, Irving Boulevard is this backdoor reliever to I-35. It is also the corridor where most of the people that are coming from Highland Park, University Park are coming down using Irving Boulevard to get into this campus right here. So I think Irving Boulevard is a very critical key visual for you all on that. So I would really love to see how the urban campus becomes more urban on your public streets. One of the things that I think is very exciting in this plan is this idea of research facilities that you guys are building here. One of the things that I would urge the landscape architects to look at is how does your landscape become an outdoor research facility for low impact development, clean water, green roofs. You know, there's so much money being put into these buildings on the interior. Anybody that drives by is not going to notice that. But I do think the landscape can play a physical and visual connection to really bringing your story alive. And how do these areas outside act as a physical science lab to make our city better from stormwater, from urban heat islands, sustainability, and things like that. So those are probably two of my bigger comments that I would have on that. I do think on your existing phase 2 and 3, maybe that bigger story of what your landscape needs to be through this courtyard that's going there needs to be created, and maybe you guys already have that. How does that apply to your courtyard here, and renovate this courtyard to be the start of that story? Don't look at piecemeal connections and plazas right here. What is the bigger identity of your interior park and campus, and then go renovate this space to be able to tell that story so it's easier for you to carry that vision through in future phases.
I do have one comment about building 20. So with the exception of building 2 and 3, which are already existing kind of right in the heart of the campus, and we have, the service and loading and emergency egress access that connects through the key of this area here of the site. All the rest of, and we've talked a lot about ground level floor activation, even in the parking garages. It's tough to convert parking garages into occupiable space over time.
Very hard.
We've had our transportation and mobility lab actually do lots and lots of research around those, and the financial triggers to be able to get that is very difficult. We'd rather not have to build them or do them in such a way so that they can be deconstructible, because there's a lot of sunk cost in there. But we have thought very intentionally about select areas. So the retail side amenities are going to also be driven by what the demand is of the users there. So there's a strong economics that's going to play into this. I think somebody asked a question about how does this become activated program. That becomes another big opportunity to draw folks in besides going to the brew pub today. But I think if you look around the site, every building here fronts on a street but our buildings are all pretty much designed to have kind of multiple points of entry, some that'll be more internal to the site, some that'll physically be facing on the street frontage. So there's an opportunity to kind of have identity on both sides of the building or in multiple locations on the building, so we can do that urban street fabric, ground level connected street wall identity that sort of will tie together with the rest of the network. Yeah, it's not exactly the most rectilinear site that sort of fit in and make that happen, but we did try to make a gesture showed that. We would definitely like to not have to see much parking.
Well, I just wonder if it's, parking is parking, it is what it is. We have to understand it. I just question the location, especially with garage too, of how you could better configure that within your master plan to make that corner more prominent for the citizens of Dallas. Not for your campus, but for the citizens of Dallas.
Right, and I think we did look at some of these other sites, just kind of thinking about continuity, and we're realizing this is probably the most significant street anchor right here in the future. And this is going to be more almost like secondary, tertiary kind of connection, because it doesn't really go anywhere. It's primarily a street that is only serving the uses that are on here. So it's not going to be a major throughway. So ultimately, as hopefully this sets a precedent for what ends up happening on these corners, this becomes a part of a building that's sitting in fabric of a larger street wall. So it looks like the prominent building right now, but it'll be more development happening down here. And I think there's some creative ways that we can kind of think about screening and designing the building as well.
Well, guys, I will reinforce what you heard before. First of all, great that you are doing what our comments are and what we did include. The basic idea, the core idea, the impulse to do something extraordinary, we applaud and we support, no question on it. So take our comment as attempts to improve what you are working on. Okay? Just to be clear. Now, said that. You have been hearing from all of us here, the concerns about parking, location, parking garages, connections, the character of the development that you're creating to be truly public, for everybody, just for the folks who work here. So that these seem to be the main things that you are hearing about on the back. When I asked you the driver for the amount of square footage that you have, the programmable square footage that you have on hand, I was going to parking myself included, because parking, of course, is a consequence of square footage that you have on the campus. So is there, since we are discussing, since we're focusing so much on parking, and since parking, the issue of parking is bothering us so much, is there a trigger, a tipping point where the amount of square footage becomes detrimental to what you are planning to do, to the character of the development? In other words, perhaps, just estimate, I have that question here. Is there too much square footage that is triggering the need, the demand for too much parking? And in turn, that is generating a plan that is insular, that is not truly connected. Stephen, great attempt. I support all the ideas, but truly, is it connected? Is it connected to Pegasus Park, as Norman asked? Is it truly open to urban boulevard? Is it the issue of the question where the issue of the corner where parking garage 2 is located? Yes, I should use my laser here. Yes, that corner is more prominent than that corner, but this is the entrance to what we are seeing here. It is the identity, what we are debating today. That's for another chapter, another time. We'll debate that as well. So, again, if the idea is to create an environment that will, one of you described what goes on with our water cooler. The idea of the water cooler where different people come together and chat and ideas fly. It's part of ideas. I'm hoping that the intent is to take that concept and make expand on that concept to an urban level, right? So are we truly doing that? Where is that happening? Where are these spark moments happening? Do we have enough there? Do we have enough moments where those sparks can happen? Or the folks who work here on building B, are they going to park here, go down, take an elevator up, and be holed up during the day and go back to their cars and go back home? Are we being intentional in providing collision points? Intentional collision points. I know it's hard. So one idea is, you brought up residential use, and you heard about other potential uses. You heard about the hotel. Sure, there is a hotel across the street. That's great. How does it, so the question is, how do we invite the hotel into the campus? If residential, great, but it seems to be sort of it on its own, very convenient for funding, for traffic, for management for flow management. But how is that contributing to the character of this? Could we perhaps, we know that we cannot have, that we shouldn't, as Diego said, we shouldn't have flags on top of parking garages. That doesn't work, and we understand. But could we go back to the traditional and improved model of wrapping parking garages with residential, and therefore making their presence less of a nuisance, instead of having all residential in one spot? Would we wrap residential around this parking garage? Would we wrap residential around this parking garage here? Maybe even around here. In other words, could we take the residential program and spread it out so to infuse life on the campus? One idea. Could we, if that's not feasible, it sounds counterintuitive, but could we place parking garage on one side and ask force people to walk through all the way to the other side. And in doing so, again, you are activating, creating intentional pollution. So, and again, I bet you guys have tested this idea, but our desire is to have a place, as you described, a place that is fully connected. You referenced Kendall Square in Cambridge. One of the reasons why Kendall Square is so successful is because, well, it wasn't created from scratch, right? It's born of what's already there, and it's truly connected with Cambridge. So you barely know where Kendall Square stops or starts because it's of a fluid body, and that's a beautiful one. That's why you reference it. That's why everyone. Right? So how do we bring that idea? How do we make sure that that fluidity happens here as well? Today, yes, the site is, it's harsh. No, you drive on Irving Boulevard, and it's not pretty. We know that. But with all the development that you're planning, as you say, this will be a catalyst, and certainly stuff will happen over here, will happen over there. So the risk is that we are building something here that has a shield around it, 1, 2, 3 shields around it that will be an impediment for the future connection of this spot into the fabric. Once again, I know that you have tested ideas, I know that you have reasons, but from where we stand, this is what we can offer you as feedback. Anything else that I missed or that the panel missed? Anything that you guys would like to comment? It's great, by the way, that you are scheduled to come back to return. That's what you said, right, Arturo?
Very likely with future phases, yes.
Yeah, with the future phase. So we like to have we enjoy having continuation of the conversation. So please take this as perhaps suggestions to be incorporated into future phases of the work when you come back and share the work with us.
One only comment that I have, and this question is, Tommy, does the PD right now give you the right to move your residential anywhere within there, or is it locked into your building A? Because I do think, long-term, your residential might want to move somewhere. And I would hate for you guys to go through a process right now that locks in this master plan that forces you to come back to the city at another time and doesn't give you market flexibility.
I don't think we've got approved development plans for the residential at all right now, so I think it could move. And to clarify my earlier comment, we want to avoid having to touch the PD to get this done. We're gonna do this next year. If we have to touch the PD for this, that might take multiple years. That's not the end of the world. We can figure that out.
Parking was probably the hardest kind of thing that we had to grapple with, and I appreciate all the comments from the committee here today because we share your pain on that. We started out trying to follow the letter of the law on PD and realized there was a lot of parking. And so we started doing a lot of benchmarking across what we're doing in other life sciences markets across the country. We talked to our teammates and colleagues in Boston, San Francisco, and Seattle, and San Diego. Currently working on 2 projects in San Diego at the same time we're doing this. Everything we're doing in San Diego is 2.5 spaces per 1,000. And what we were hearing here was way higher. So when we started, we went around and around and around before we settled on a lower number of parking space ratio. And this is actually parked at a lower ratio than if we currently were following the regulatory requirements. So that's part of one of the conversations we want to have around this parking is lowering it. So we only have to do the amount of parking that's shown here. If we could get it lower, that would be remarkable. And we would applaud everybody who would be able to help us get in that direction. So I did want to just kind of share that notion. And parking does have to go somewhere. And if we're assuming we have to meet that programmatic criteria. And so we spent a lot of times, as we've indicated, thinking about where the right locations for that were and how we could get people out of their cars as quickly as possible and into a pedestrian-oriented focused environment. Recognizing that we wanted people to be able to access and see buildings from the street, and very, from a wayfinding perspective, very clearly know how to get out of their vehicle as quickly as possible, and then get them into a setting that was more amenable to the kinds of bumpability. I call it bumpability, which is like the intentional design of spaces and places to create that accidental interaction. And so we have thought about those kinds of moments where, I would be coming out of my garage and I would be thrown right into this space. And this space would, maybe potentially take me into outdoor pods and outdoor work areas before I would be able to go over and go into my building. So we get people coming and going out of the buildings at different times over the day and really having that opportunity to spill out and kind of interact in different ways. So I don't want to come across as being defensive, but when we do look at kind of programmatic occupiable uses, we really wanted to have a certain concentration so that when people were walking down out of their office buildings, they were immediately connecting to public realm. They could still get dropped off by an Uber. We have parking drop-off, and we have drop-off locations identified for every building. They can still get dropped off at a front of the building, but they can also enter a front of the building from the street and from the interior side. And the intention, if we look at parking garages, all of these different locations, and this whole focus of creating this green heart that actually is Green Street that's connecting up to Pegasus, really, that's part of the reason we kind of ended up pushing parking to the edges. We knew people are gonna arrive by car. We wanted to get them in the garages and out of them as quickly as possible, make the wayfinding and access points to get there, and not make the center part of the campus about looking at this big parking structure.
And I think that's probably the difference that this panel sees, is that you're thinking about your users that are using the office buildings. We're thinking about the people on the outside that are driving by and coming here, which is the citizens of Dallas, that will see this fabric that you're creating for the next 50 years. So in a way, there has to be a balance. And I think you obviously, it's a big struggle to do that. But I think that we just want to make it clear that our focus here is, one, think about how you create a great campus for your user. Like, how do you create a great place for the city of Dallas?
Right.
And I think what we're saying, if you haven't heard us, is that that is still lacking in some places in the master plan.
It's adding the additional mixed use here, housing that, help share with that parking students, that. And Dallas needs affordable workforce. I think integrating the workforce housing, could help masks and breathe through the street edge.
Just a couple other comments. This is again from a civil at the moment. I know we talked about connecting that, going to that on the park level, but in reality, we walk with it is a very clear end of us, and it's all this operators and candidates. So this project is big enough. This is, I think, on page own of measurement is possible. I will have to demand from the spirit, and people take it and because it has so much impact on the property, and at a minimum, it requires, I think, one or two application costs. So the gap gets very, very big. I know exactly what that is like. Second, the campus that big, have you already reached out to Encore to find out what they're going to do? If not, I will recommend doing it now. Like, the critical mass is important to know how they're going to service, and that may impact some of your thinking. I think that area between the parking garage 3 and existing building, that back of the house for all, buildings and trash, is that what, that's what that's such a big space?
This one right here?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, so that existing, yeah. So just like Encore, this is big enough development, but I think we need the city government just for sanitation service. How is it going to service? Because you want to control that and program it. And I'm, I don't get into that. If there is any way for the people not to park across public streets,
So that street is gonna have a lot of traffic, but, not that one street, so anybody parking in the garage one, it is not the same as I just call the garage and I'm in public space, I'm crossing them. There's no traffic, and no people that can cross, it's, you know. With the fire protection, one that I mentioned, in the middle of that. That I forward, this needs to be verified. So let's go with that. Okay, one of the, how many years development is it? I know that it's just going on like tomorrow. What about the building A and B and C and D? Okay. How many years?
This will be over a 10-year plus 10 cycle.
So the only thing would be that I would like to see if you guys come back, please show us how that construction will be like, because you see all that parking that is, the surface parking, that is in this place. When you just build building A, what happens when you add building B, and you know that phase approach, and you can better understand when all of this is torn up, what is happening for the next 5 years while the next building comes on. Next building comes on. Ready?
All right, Arturo. I think panel is.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
Right, thank you. No.
Sorry. I'm trying to keep up, but I've got a total of 9 comments. I'm gonna read back, make sure that I got what you guys said.
Okay, would you please
Yes.
try to summarize?
Okay. First comment is, please explore how the campus can be better incorporated with Pegasus Park Drive to Irving Boulevard and the surrounding environment, the surrounding urban environment. Number 2, provide further thought related to the edges of campus and how parking structures can be integrated further into the surrounding neighborhood with consideration of adding usable space at prominent locations. And I'm going to apologize because I think I have 2 that are very similar. And when I do send these comments out, I might combine them into 1 instead of 2. Number 3 is explore opportunities to better address how buildings 2 and 3 can help activate, frame, and provide interest to the surrounding campus quad. Number 4, as parking structures are designed, provide more thought on how they can be set up to accommodate conversion to usable space in the future and/or incorporate usable liner development today that better addresses prominent locations to mitigate dominance and assist in helping the urban campus be more urban on public streets. Number 5 is continue to work with transportation agencies to explore how you may add options to safely and conveniently connect to additional transit options such as TRE. Number 6 is explore how landscape can play a larger physical and visual piece that tells a story for Pegasus Park with respect to urban heat island, sustainability, and low impact development practices. Number 7, provide additional thought on how campus components can add to networking, personal interaction opportunities, and infuse life to the campus through a balance of parking garage placement and complementary uses, wrapping those parking garages. The last one is consider how infrastructure, services, operation, parking needs can all coexist with the larger campus goals related to open space and circulation.
Very good. I have one more. Don't know exactly how to phrase it, but something along the lines of consider or revisit program and parking demand, program versus parking demand, to ensure that the intent of the campus is remains true to itself. And I would also suggest or recommend that the team engages with the city in terms of minimum parking requirements, given the unique circumstance, the unique condition of this of the proposed development. Is that why what is truly the minimum parking required? Is it what the code says, what the PD says, or is there something else that the city will be willing to negotiate with the developer? And finally, perhaps revisit, in addition to everything that you said, another idea is perhaps revisit location of parking and labs to ensure that the intentional collisions for to ensure that the bumpability ratio remains or increases. Put it that way.
Increased body.
There you go. Increased body.
Great. Yeah, I had something similar to that. I'll incorporate it into a previous comment. And I do, like was that it? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Your comment about continuing to work with the city on parking requirements and
Yes.
and minimizing those, I think that's something that's already happened and we'll continue to do that. And I'll add that as a comment, as a reminder that yes, we're going to show these. Yeah.
Yes, the kind of support for the. Okay, with that, once again, thank you all for coming. It's great, thank you for the work. We want to see you as soon, hopefully before end year. So,
It is.
great thing for the city. And you guys are doing something very, very special. So, thank you.
Best of luck with you all the great things we got in Dallas here.
Yeah.
Somewhere else.
Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Thanks for all. Thank you.
I have a, well, quick item.
Lauren's got big comments.
I got more to say. No. Future sessions, by virtue of it being a public-private partnership, do we anticipate seeing the Kalita master plan come before this board? And if not, can we make that happen?
I believe it is coming at some point. We've had very brief discussions. I'll talk to Julia Reinhardt about it, to make sure that that is the case.
They're moving quickly. I would ask that we try to do it in January because I'm tracking it separately. They have many issues that I think would be of great interest to this board. And so this panel, we're a panel, I'm sorry. Okay.
And to that point, I'm sorry to interrupt, just a reminder before the panel leaves. The way we're reserving rooms next year is different. They're doing it month to month. So I only
Okay.
have January's date, and that's January 27th.
Okay.
But that date is confirmed, and I'll look to see if we can get the Kalita.
Okay. And I would suggest that I really didn't see, I thought it would be really great to make the design team stand the entire time and put them at a disadvantage, but it just didn't seem to work. So if we can find a way to get chairs for these poor folks next time, I think we should. I'll help you do that. Well,
Hopefully we're not in the same room, but I agree. And then we can have,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.